The Ukraine war began in 2022. Since then, Kyiv has had many tough weeks, but none as bad as the last one. For 3 years, the US has backed Ukraine in this war, but Donald Trump came and changed that. So now Kyiv is left on its own. Its NATO membership bid is up in the air. The US wants its mineral reserves. It may have to concede land to Russia, and a peace deal is being negotiated, but not on its own terms. What will all of this mean for Ukraine? What is President Zelensky's next step? What will Kyiv have to lose to end this war? Our next report tells you.
For nearly 3 years, Ukraine has waged a war of survival. It has endured battlefield losses. It has had victories, international summits, shifting alliances, and the tragic weight of lost lives. But the past week has been the most punishing in Ukraine's struggle. A week in which the fragile scaffold of Western support began to tremble, all under the weight of American indifference. The shock came from Washington, where President Trump all but dismantled the rhetorical edifice of unwavering US support. No NATO membership, no security guarantees.
Do you oppose NATO membership for Ukraine?
I don't think it's practical to have it, personally.
If the war were to end, he says he wants guarantees of security.
We'll see what that means.
And no obligation to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity. In the face of America's retreat, someone needed to fill the gap. The obvious choice was Europe. The European Union has been steadfast in its support for Ukraine, but it lacks the military capability to replace US security guarantees.
It will provoke a world war. There is nothing else I can say about these negotiations. We are at war, so it's okay, but poor Europe. I think this is another step towards a world war. Trump is trying to pacify the aggressor.
I believe there should be justice for Ukraine, because I consider the ceasefire to be our defeat. We have been destroyed for so long. How many heroes died? What is the reconciliation? The world has to intervene.
Today marked a key moment in history, the sort of moment you may play back in your mind years later. And it happened in Saudi Arabia, in the capital city of Riyadh. 2 delegations held talks at the Diriyah Palace. Let me pull up that picture for you. On the left is the US delegation, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. In the middle, you can see the hosts, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister and Security Advisor. And on the right, the Russians, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and a presidential aide of Vladimir Putin. This image was unthinkable after 2022. Forget holding talks at the same table. Western officials would get up and leave when Lavrov started speaking. Yet here we are. The Americans and Russians talked for more than 4 hours. They also had a working lunch. Overall, the mood was serious and businesslike. No smiles, handshakes or hugs. And what about the outcomes? The United States has released a statement. It talks about 4 points of consensus. Number 1, establish a mechanism to address irritants in the relationship. Now, I'm not sure what irritant means here. Is it Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or American sanctions on Russia, or European refusal to talk peace? There is no clarity yet, but both sides are hoping to normalize relations, even appoint ambassadors to smooth things out. Number 2, both sides will appoint a team to discuss Ukraine. They will try to end the war as soon as possible. US officials said 2 issues would dominate those talks: territory concessions and security guarantees. Listen to this.
Well, there are some underlying principles. This needs to be a permanent end to the war and not a temporary end as we've seen in the past. We know just the practical reality is that there is going to be some discussion of territory and there's going to be discussion of security guarantees.
Number 3, the US and Russia will cooperate in post-war Ukraine. In fact, let me quote the statement. We agreed to lay the groundwork for future cooperation on matters of mutual geopolitical interest and historic economic and investment opportunities which will emerge from a successful end to the conflict in Ukraine. Again, this is a broad statement. It could mean a lot of things. Will the US lift sanctions on Russia? Will Russia be allowed to invest again in Ukraine, or are they just talking about bilateral deals? These are unthinkable scenarios right now. Yet the statement hints at them. And finally, point number 4, both sides agreed to keep up engagements. They promised to move forward in a timely and productive manner. Those engagements could also involve a Putin-Trump meeting. Both sides agreed on the need for it. But a date is yet to be worked out, and those are the 4 points of consensus. Russia seems quite thrilled about it. They call the talks positive. They also praise the Trump team for ditching Joe Biden's position. As expected, there are no concrete measures. What we have is a statement of intent. America and Russia want to end the war in Ukraine. They also want to normalize their relationship. Frankly, this is as significant as any specific measure. The question is, what happens next? Well, concessions will have to be made. Russia is already prepared to make one. They have asked Ukraine to stop chasing NATO membership, but they are now okay with Kyiv joining the EU. Listen to this.
This is the sovereign right of any country. We are talking about integration and economic integration processes. And here, of course, no one can dictate anything to any country, and we are not going to do so. We do have completely different approach, though, to questions related to security and links to military and security alliances.
The US has already agreed to the NATO bit. They have shut the door on Ukraine's membership, and today's meeting suggests more concessions could be lined up, perhaps on sanctions and territory. The US says sanctions will have to be lifted once a deal is struck. And all of this will worry Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is also in West Asia today, but he was not invited to the talks. He has made one thing clear, though. He will not accept any deal made behind his back.
Ukraine will not take part in the talks in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine did not know anything about them. Ukraine regards any negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine as ones that have no result. And we cannot recognize anything, any agreements about us made without us, and will not recognize such agreements.
Well, there is no deal yet, but the trajectory will worry Zelensky. He was slated to visit Saudi Arabia this week, but after these talks, he has postponed that trip. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio tried to address these concerns. He said Europe and Ukraine would be at the table.
It's a high-level team, including those who are experts on these topics, the technical side, to begin to engage with their side on parameters of what an end to this conflict would look like. And on that front, obviously, there's going to be engagement and consultation with Ukraine, with our partners in Europe and others. But ultimately, the Russian side will be indispensable to this effort.
Well, at the table will not satisfy Kyiv or Europe for that matter, because it could mean a lot of things again. For example, will Ukraine be involved in the formulation of the peace plan? Will they be consulted at every stage? Will their inputs be included? Or will they be given a deal to sign right at the end? That part is not clear yet. Also, Trump is driving a hard bargain. He knows that Zelensky wants security guarantees from the US, so he's putting a big price on it. Donald Trump wants a 50% cut, not just on Ukraine's rare earth minerals, but on all minerals. The US also wants access to ports, energy, and infrastructure. Zelensky has already rejected this deal, but going forward, he may not really have an option. The Riyadh reset has boxed him into a corner. His last hope is Europe.